Hi everyone, my name is Ravynne and this is the first of my Ravynne's Rambles videos. There are already a large number of highly skilled artists who share their process via video. Over time, I would like to create a channel that is equal in that it offers quality content, but I'm not just an artist. It is but part of a greater whole. I am also a storyteller, a photographer, and more. Every aspect influences the other. No aspect is independent or separate to the whole. So I'm not sure if it is possible for me to create a video that showcases and discusses the art only. Every painting has a story. Every painting has been influenced by my life and experiences. It's impossible to separate the art from everything else, and so I've decided that it might be best not to try. Instead, it is better for me to go with the flow and do what feels right to me. And so my walkthroughs are not likely to be heavy on the instruction side of things. I will leave that to those amazing artists out there who possess both better technique and more skill than I do. Instead, I am going to share both my art and the thoughts that flit around in my head whilst I am working on a painting. And now that I've had the opportunity to record my creative endeavours a couple of times, I've discovered that because of my ability to focus to the exclusion of all else, that I zone out and don't hear the camera turn off when the memory card is full. As a result, there are large parts of my painting process that are missing, which means I can't really create a walkthrough with them. There is just so much more to the creative process than the application of paint to paper. For me, every painting is a blend of faith, thought, emotion and application. And when it comes to the thought side of things, my mind rarely closes for business. There are only 5 things that I can think of that quieten the chatter that goes on in my head. Time with friends, sleep, painting when I zone out, photography and music. When I am not doing one of those things, there is always an internal dialogue going on. I'm full of words that need release. I sometimes wonder if I'm full of words because I don't spend a lot of time physically speaking. Are these the conversations I would be having with others if there was another person in the room? Maybe so. Instead, they are most often expressed in the written word. I surprised myself when I created my first video. Initially, the idea of adding my voice made me cringe, but I found that I enjoyed speaking and loved the fact that I didn't have to stand in front of an audience to do so. Public speaking is not something I enjoy, nor something I am confident that I could do well because it takes me time to order my thoughts and express them clearly. The fact that I can write the dialogue for a video allows me to order my thoughts and then stay on track. Video feels like it's my medium. It feels natural to me, and that is why I'm doing something unexpected, something that even I did not believe I would consider up until a few days ago. I've decided to try and make you all as crazy as I am by having you listen to my rambles instead of reading them, and doing so whilst watching me paint. Won't that be fun? Before I go any further, I guess I'd best get the important stuff out of the way. The video you are watching is of me working on my first Grisaille painting. What is a Grisaille? It is a painting created in neutral shades of grey. Traditionally, it was a painting that would be executed as a tonal study or as an underlayer for an oil painting. Like many other artists, I now plan to take this process and adapt it for use with acrylics. I used Liquitex heavy body acrylic paints mixed with Liquitex matte medium and a small amount of Liquitex slow dry blending medium. I created a range of greys with a mix of zinc white, Mars black, neutral grey and a dash of phthalo blue. As always, I painted on Archer's hot press smooth watercolour paper and used a combination of a round, flat and filbert brush. The Grisaille took approximately 10 hours for me to paint. And now all of that technical stuff's out of the way, it's ramble time. It could be said that I never travel in a straight line. The shortest distance between my starting point and destination always takes me over hill and dale, through dark forests, across deep crevasses, up mountains and down them again. I get lost along the way, I go round in circles, I take my time here and there to enjoy the scenery and then remember that I've somewhere to be. I am a rambler. The title of my videos is meant to serve also as a warning, so prepare yourself. Up until I completed work on the illustrations for the tarot, my painting process involved a 50-50 split between the use of traditional paintbrushes and an airbrush. I did not enjoy working with acrylics until I began using the airbrush. I loved the smooth, flawless gradients I could achieve with it, but also loved the gently textured detail I could render with my paintbrushes. I believe the use of both allowed me to find an artistic style that was recognisably my own, It could have something to do with my being bipolar, but I loved the way the two brush forms complemented each other. A couple of years ago, everything changed, and I found myself faced with a decision that many artists are forced to make. I had to give up something I loved because it was affecting my health. Over the years, I began to notice that after I used the airbrush, I would have irritated sinuses and worse, blisters forming in my nasal passages. Yeah, grody stuff. I began to suspect that my unprotected use of the airbrush was exposing the inside of my nose and sinuses to paint particles that, while not toxic, were very much an irritant. So I gave the airbrush a break for a while and the problem resolved. I went back to using the airbrush and the problem returned. I repeated this process several times and yielded the same result every time. The only way to prevent them was for me to wear a mask or to stop using the airbrush. I was always aware that I should be wearing a mask, but there were also a number of reasons why I didn't. I wear glasses and I tend to sweat a lot. I can't wear a mask when I use an airbrush unless I wear contact lenses, because if I wear my glasses and a mask, I sweat, my glasses fog up and I can't see what I'm doing. The same thing happens if I wear a bandana around my face. Don't even mention a full face mask. The very notion triggers feelings of claustrophobia. As for contact lenses, there was a time when I wore them all the time, but as I grew older they became less comfortable, so I gradually began to wear them less and wear my glasses more. Then, as I grew older, my eyesight changed and I found myself needing bifocals. Contact lenses are something I can wear when I'm going out and socialising, but they are no longer suitable for wear when I'm working on a painting. I just can't see well enough. Another option was to improve the ventilation in my workspace. I could position a fan behind me that blew the paint particles away from me. But I work in my living room, and it's a space I share with two other adults and several animals. So this was deemed to be an option that was better left until such time as I had my own studio. In the end, I decided that maybe the best option was to use my airbrush a lot less and learn a new painting process. This, however, also filled me with some trepidation, because giving up the airbrush meant my style, my artistic voice, would change. A new way of painting would mean that my work no longer looked like something I had painted. So far, over this last year in particular, I've worked with digital, graphite, pen, coloured pencils, watercolours and acrylics without the airbrush. Before I used the airbrush, I used other mediums all the time, but then when I found that comfortable rhythm with the airbrush-paintbrush combination, I stopped using them completely. I became so invested in that one method of painting that I just did not think of any other. It was only after I began using other mediums again that I realised just how much I miss them. Every one of them resonates with me in a different way, sometimes for very different reasons. Pen and graphite allow me to create in a very uncomplicated way. Working in black and white or with shades of grey has my focus shift to light and dark and nothing more. Whilst coloured pencil spoke to my inner child because it was the first medium I ever created with. I love working with coloured pencils and always have. Watercolours fascinate me because I love working with layers, and digital is for me a fearless form of painting. I've enjoyed working with graphite so very much that I now plan on embracing it as part of my illustration process for the new animal oracle I am working on. I see that my choice to pack up my airbrush has allowed me to reconnect and fall in love all over again with mediums that were once like dear friends. I have toyed with the idea of working with a Grisaille for several years now, but being a creature of habit, I found myself unwilling to make the time to experiment. I was happy with my process and felt no real need to change it, nor was I really free to change it. I was still working on the tarot illustrations and needed their appearance to remain consistent. It would have been reckless of me to take on something that would change the appearance of my work when I needed the paintings I was working on to look the same. But still, I was free to explore and experiment, and I was unwilling to do so. I just felt no real need. But now the fact that I cannot use the airbrush all the time, it's forced me to change my thinking. I've had to accept and embrace new ways of thinking, doing, creating across the board. So I am exploring the Grisaille and glazing technique with the intent to take it and adapt it and evolve it into something that works for me. I mentioned earlier that I would be working with graphite on a regular basis, but graphite is not a suitable medium to use under paint. If not fixed properly, it can mix with the paint and dull the intensity of the colours applied above. But I am more confident setting my values with graphite than I am with paint. I've always had to push myself to add more shadow and light. For some inexplicable reason, working with contrast in a painting intimidates me. I have no idea why. So for now, I will create a graphite illustration for every one of the deck illustrations. I will then scan the illustration into my computer, clean up and tweak whatever needs tweaking, and then, because my printer uses acid-free pigment inks instead of dye inks, I will use it to transfer the illustration onto watercolour paper. The majority of my oracle and tarot card illustrations are painted on smooth watercolour paper. I never paint over my original drawings. I always preserve them. I compose a line work, scan it, clean up the drawing digitally, and then, using the same process already mentioned, I print it out directly onto the paper. Using this process, the graphite drawing will become the foundation for the colour version. I will use the printed underlayer as a guide where setting values are concerned, and create a tonal Grisaille underlayer similar to the one I am working on in this video. I will then colour the Grisaille using acrylics that have been made transparent by mixing them with a glazing medium. Grollup, my dragon friend in the video, was in fact one of the first illustrations I was going to use to explore the Grisaille technique years ago, so I felt it was fitting that he be the first. He's been so very patient with me. And patience is a key theme of this ramble, and one of the key words for the card that the finished painting will become. Of late, my patience has been tested. I've been pushed to my limits when it comes to being patient with myself as I try to process and remember all the new stuff in my life. Over the last year, I've come to see just how much I do not know, and how much I have to evolve both my abilities as an artist and my online presence. For the first time in a very long time, I actually find myself more focused on learning as opposed to healing. But learning, like healing, takes time. I want to learn more in order to become a better artist. I'm proud of the artist I am, but my lack of knowledge can and does hamper me on occasion. There was a time when I scorned the lessons offered by many fine art institutes, but now if I could afford classes, I'd be back to school in order to learn all of the things I don't know. And I'm starting to see that my conditioning, how I've been taught to think and behave by others, has begun to impede my ability to learn as fast as I would like. And I become impatient with myself when I see those conditioned reactions slowing me down. I become impatient with myself when I cannot learn fast enough. I admit I miss using the airbrush, and I know there are going to be times ahead when I will tie a bandana around my face just so I can use it again. But part of me recognises that I miss it more because it's familiar. On a growth level, I am glad that I chose to step away from using it, because in doing so I created the opportunity for myself to grow and learn. If I had chosen to get used to wearing a mask, my growth as an artist would have continued to slow. I would have continued to polish and refine my technique, but there would have come a time when growth in that area would have halted. As the years pass, I've come to recognise that I have a need to be challenged mentally and creatively, or I get bored. Challenging myself to improve, to become the best artist I can be, is something that motivates me. It keeps me interested. Finding a different way to paint, one that frees me from my dependency on the airbrush, is challenging, but it's also very rewarding. There are consequences, one of them being that I am no longer as confident or as sure of myself. I now experience fear more because I don't know what I'm doing, and because that potential to mess things up is greatly increased. I'm okay with mistakes and flaws, but I hate messing things up to such a degree that paintings are left unfinished or have to be started over. Time for me is my most valuable commodity, and I live with the awareness that it is limited. I might learn from my mistakes, but when I have to start from scratch because of a mistake I've made, I will gnash my teeth a bit over the time cost involved. These days, I am confident one minute and unsure of myself the next. I've been painting for nearly 15 years now. Everything I know about acrylics I have learned in this last 10 years, and I've reached a level I am at because in that 10 years I've devoted tens of thousands of hours to painting with them. The knowledge I have attained during this time has given me confidence, and suddenly here I am 15 years into my career, having to both learn a new way of painting, learning new ways to promote and sell my art and promote the tarot, as well as learning how to live a good, happy life as a single, highly introverted and creative, bipolar 40-something-year-old woman. But even though I'm afraid at times, I'm also delighted and excited. I've come to see that for me there needs to be that element of fear of failure or risk involved, or I question why I am doing it. I need contrast, which is quite fascinating because, as mentioned earlier, creating enough contrast in my paintings has always been something I've struggled with. It was the one constant criticism I received when I sought advice from a more experienced artist. My work lacks contrast, and yet it is something I seem to need in my life in order to create. Which is why I feel that working with the Grisaille technique and using my graphite illustrations as an underlayer will help me. It will focus my attention on setting my values and adding more light and dark. It will help me to address that area of weakness. It will challenge me to learn and grow. When I first stopped painting with the airbrush, I began to paint digitally. Painting with digital paint, as I've said before, is a fearless process. The only way to mess up when you're working with digital paint is if you fail to save your work and your computer crashes. Digital paint is always wet. It can always be reworked. It can always be changed. Mistakes can be painted over. You can create multiple layers that allow you to work on an individual element within the painting and then put it all back together seamlessly. Once you've learned how to use the software, painting digitally allows you to do almost anything without consequence, because you can always take the painting back to its original state. Make a mistake, you can paint over it or undo it. You can explore without limits or restrictions. If you don't like that colour, then with a little bit of a tweak, you can see what it would look like in every colour of the rainbow. And because of that, I found myself becoming bored with it very quickly. I was bored, or I would get lost in the desire to explore and experiment. As a consequence, digital paintings take me so much longer, too long. So now when I paint digitally, I have to set myself a challenge, for example, a time limit. I have to finish the painting in no more time than I would spend on a traditional picture. Another way to challenge myself is to work on only one layer instead of multiple layers. If I don't set myself a challenge when I paint digitally, then I find myself procrastinating and being less productive as a result of having too much freedom. I need restrictions, even just self-imposed illusory ones, to motivate me. And yet I don't impose them to actually restrict me, but so I have something to push against. I am geared to run on defiance and a desire to break through perceived boundaries. If I have no boundaries, I falter. If I have no rules to break or authority figures to defy, I don't strive. People from my past, who now appear as characters in my story, would ask me why I insist on doing things the hard way. Well, I don't insist on anything. I don't plan or set out to make my life difficult or hard. It's just that I work better when the work involved offers me as much challenge as it does reward. And if I didn't have that little bit of doing things the hard way there to challenge me, I'd be bored out of my skull. I do my best work when I am challenged. The guidebook for the Dreams of Gaia Tarot is a perfect example. Most of it was written while my relationship of 24 years was coming to an end, and in the midst of all that chaos, something beautiful and powerful came into being. Every illustration for the deck offered me the opportunity to work through the meaning. Working on the tarot challenged me to ask questions, seek answers, and act on what I had learned. Yes, some of what was revealed was painful, and it would have looked at times as if I was deliberately opening old wounds and unwilling to let go of the past. But it was a necessary process. I needed to explore my past in order to better understand what was needed for the tarot. The experience didn't kill me. It made me stronger. It made me more peaceful, compassionate, understanding, aware, and mindful. I am someone who learns best through practical application. I also process information with more ease if it is delivered on a visual level. I like video tutorials as a means of learning because of this. I learn so much more if I am watching another person apply their knowledge and skill in a practical, physical manner. They also spend more time showing as opposed to telling. For me, my best method of learning is show, don't tell. Observation, application, experimentation, trial and error. In this lay the paradoxical answer to the question of why I insist on doing things the hard way. Because for me, the hard way is the easier way. I understand with more ease by learning this way. I retain more information this way. I just have to continue to moderate my impatience and remind myself that I'm only human and that there are only so many hours in a day. The acquisition of knowledge, especially when it comes to mastering a new skill or mastering your own behaviour, is not instantaneous. It takes time and in many ways requires that you unlearn almost as much as you learn. You are always going to be a novice who makes mistakes before you become adept, and only the willingness to devote time to practice will make you an adept. And on that note, this ramble is now at an end. There is a longer, slightly more intimate and personal version of this video available to Patreon members. $1 a month will grant you access to more of my personal story, plans and project development. I can also be found on Instagram and Facebook. The links can be found below. And if you enjoyed this little ramble, click the like button. And if you have a question or thoughts to share, don't be afraid to ask or comment. Until next time, be well.